and one granddaughter for dinner tonight.
Can I take a moment to welcome you to the Environment and Community Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council for February 2021. This meeting is open to the public and live streamed. Can I welcome those in the gallery and those watching online? Can I take a moment to welcome our Mayor, Paul Antonio, Deputy Mayor, CEO, General Manager Nick Hauser, various managers and staff, especially from the Environment and Community Services portfolio. Welcome. And an honourable welcome to Paul Dawson from BPAC, who's here today at the invitation of many around this room, and thank you for taking the time to come. Can I also take a moment to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We move on to item 2, attendance, including apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. Any apologies on attendance? I notice we have one already approved. Do we need to move anything on that, or it's already approved? Already approved. Declarations. Councillor McDonald, thank you.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Declaration refers to item number 6, which is the Youth Grants Program Approval, January 2021. I inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in sections 150 EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. This declarable conflict of interest arises because I am the Mayor's delegate to the applicant organisation Safer Toowoomba Regional Partnerships. I wish to participate in the decision in relation to this matter. I acknowledge that eligible councillors must now determine, pursuant to section 150 ES of the Local Government Act 2009, whether I, 1, may participate in the decision about this matter, including voting on the matter, 2, must leave the meeting, including any area set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while the eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter, or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions.
Thanks, Councillor Jeff. Do we have anyone, councillors, in your hands on whether Councillor McDonald can stay in the meeting or not? So, Councillor McDonald, your involvement in Safer Toowoomba Partnerships, do you have much to do with? Tell me how what you have to do with the youth grants application in more detail.
Thanks, Mr Chair. It's actually more of a this is a council appointment. So the constitution of Safer Toowoomba Regional Council, Safer Toowoomba Regional Partnerships, states the Mayor as the chair of the organisation, or his or her delegate, and it just so happens that I am the delegate to chair that organisation. So effectively, it's a council appointment, which would, by the Local Government Act, mean that I don't have a prescribed conflict of interest. It's a declarable conflict of interest, but as it's appointed through the council, it's more of a case of making councillors be aware of it. In regard to your second question, what have I had to do with the Youth Grants Program? I've had no more than any other councillor, I would assume, in the room in being part of the decision-making process to authorise a Youth Grants Program be approved or be acted upon. So I would have no other influence in that regard.
Question, thank you.
Question, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I have no idea of what the connection is, and I think it's, whilst it all sounds wonderful, I don't think that the Safer Partnerships has too much to do with cultural burning. And I don't believe there's any conflict, but I think it's just...
No, we're talking about, Councillor Taylor, the Youth Grants Program approval and the Safer Toowoomba Partnerships being... Councillor McDonald said, yeah, that's the link, not the burning one.
So how is that the link? I fail to understand.
Councillor McDonald, could you answer Councillor Carroll?
This is something council's deciding. It's not going through the grants process.
Mr Chair, I think just clarification. We're talking about conflicts of interest at the start of the meeting.
Absolutely.
For item number 6. It's nothing to do with item number...
Sorry. My apologies, Councillor McDonald. I was focused on the first item.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm happy to move that Councillor McDonald is eligible to stay in the room for discussion and decision.
And I'll
Happy to
second
second.
that.
Councillor Taylor seconded. Any debate? All those in favour? Passed. Thank you. Sorry, could I just get those votes, show of hands again?
I guess there's no more or less.
That's unanimous. Councillor McDonald did not vote. Councillor Summerfield, could you state reasons, please?
Councillor McDonald is appointed to that role via council, and it is his role to represent council at those meetings, but then also be able to provide information that he has to the discussions that will be held today. And I don't see that there is any conflict there whatsoever, as it's a council appointment.
You happy, Wendy? Awesome. Economic Development Committee, conflict of interest. We move again to Councillor McDonald.
We do that.
Oh, we do that. Okay. So, thank you, councillors. Move to item 3 on the agenda, consideration of cultural burning as complementary to council land management. Can I hand over to General Manager Nick Hauser for that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your first formal stint as Chair. Well done. Good morning, councillors, and as my first attendance at a formal council meeting for the year, being on leave in January, I wish you all a very happy new year. Councillors, the first item in relation to cultural burning as complementary to council land was considered, a report was presented to you in December, and subsequent to the receipt, consideration of that report at the Environment Committee of December, feedback was received from Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation, and the matter was deferred for further consideration and addressing of that feedback that we received. I'm pleased to say that since then there's been much engagement, and acknowledge Mr Dawson in the room today, as Councillor McMahon already has, between the council teams and Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation, including meetings on site, and just last week a larger meet and greet gathering, bringing all the teams together to discuss partnerships and methods of benefiting from each other's knowledge and moving forward. Councillors, the report includes a table outlining some of the issues and concerns raised, and the responses or outcomes from subsequent discussions. And the recommendations of the report are the same as put to you in December, and that is to note the report and also to endorse the progression of strategies to advance development of partnerships agreements between Council and Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation. And those discussions are advanced, and there are sites that are identified for such partnership arrangements, and I look forward to being able to execute those and see the benefits that they'll bring to council and the community. The team is here to answer any questions that you have, councillors, and with that I'll hand back to the Chair.
Thanks, General Manager. Questions? Councillor Carl.
Not a question, Chair. A small but important correction to the report. Anywhere where it's referenced to, I draw your attention to page 4 of 6 of the report on Board Books 10 of 649. The fourth paragraph heading off with BPAC in capitals. Remains the interest in involvement in the management of Mealbar. It's actually Miwa. And just a small but important correction to the name. It's spelled M-E-E-W-A-H is my understanding of it. So.
Could I just, thanks Councillor Carl, could I get Mark Reddy to make comment on that name change from Council's position?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. In relation to the spelling of the name of what we call tabletop, which is Miwa, or what the Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation has referred to as Mealbar, to the best of our knowledge, there were a number of Aboriginal groups who had an interest in that place, and spelling might have been the same as being a non-spoken language, a non-written language, I should say, spoken language. The spelling was probably done by white fellas like me who got it wrong. and there might be a couple of those floating, is my understanding. Any disagreement with that, Paul?
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I note here that there's no budgetary considerations for this particular term, but I guess that if we do, I support it, of course, and I think it's probably really a step forward that we're going down this way. But should there need to be any budgetary considerations, I hope that goes through the same process as everything else does. Has to. Thank you.
General Manager, do you want to make a comment on that? Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Through you to Nick and the team. I just want to thank the team for issues and responses, outlining it in that column format. After we received Mr Dawson's letter, I did feel that it was important that we address what was raised, and I'm grateful that item by item that has been done in such a way. So it's just a comment to say thank you very much for the transparency and the directness that the report's been written.
Councillor McDonald.
Pardon me. Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Through you to Nick, that same paragraph that Councillor Carl mentions, I just wanted to touch on, and it's written down, the concerns and responses in regard to BPAC's involvement in the management of Mealbar Tabletop. And it mentions there that the recent rainfall has afforded time to work together to advance this. I guess that's an advantage of some level of delay. So can you just elaborate further on how that's progressing and what that actually means?
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. I'll need Mr Reddy to elaborate around that one. But we were approached by Paul and Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation during, I guess, the late winter or early spring of last year, and there was a very small window of opportunity for us to conduct that burn at that time. Unfortunately, the necessity for council to enter into agreements and those sorts of things caused the delay that window passed us very quickly as the weather warmed up, you'll remember, in late September and October. So that passed us for last year, but certainly eyes are to the future and to have a look at that for this year. But I might ask Mr Reddy to provide further commentary in relation to the steps taken now, what we might expect this year.
Thank you again for the question. With regards to agreements for actioning and working together in relation to Mealbar, the General Manager has presented that accurately. It was to do with getting the agreements in place at the time and the weather windows that were rapidly closed upon us. Our intent now is to work with Paul and his team and to actually get up there and have a bit of a walk on country, a good look around, so that we can share some knowledge and work out how we're going to progress that. Paul and his team still are considering the agreement, and I'm sure we'll move that forward in due course. Would you like to add anything, Paul?
Thanks very much for that, Mark. And just a comment, I guess, in endorsing Councillor Von Hoff's comments, that this is obviously something that Council's very supportive of, but I just wanted to also let you know that a conversation with Friends of Escarpment Parks recently with Hugh Krinsky also sang the praises of the opportunity with Council working with BPAC. I ran into Hugh out at Gumbunji, actually, at the opening of an exhibition, and he particularly wanted to point out Friends of Escarpment Parks' recognition of Council working with BPAC in this fashion. So this is being noticed, and we do appreciate the work that's being done, and particularly the presence of Paul here today. So, thanks, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Shine.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not aware of what was previously written that Councillor Von Hoff referred to, but reading the report, I take it that that there may have been a bit of a breakdown in communications about when burning was to be done. Just looking at the recommendations, is it the case that it's envisaged that BPAC will be involved or be invited to be involved in all or most of the burning activities that plan to be undertaken in the future. And if that is the case, would you envisage, or would there be envisaged any possibility of a lack of communication or organisation in terms of when both parties are able to participate? In other words, the council might want to burn on a particular day, but that's not available time for BPAC to be involved. After all, they are performing this on a volunteer basis, not on a commercial basis. So I'm just wondering, one, is BPAC to be involved in most or all of the burning activities? And two, do you foresee any problems in organising when these activities would take place?
Okay. Thanks, Councillor. In relation to BPAC's involvement in Council Burns, we're yet to have the discussion of Council's burning program for the year, but the intention is to make any burns that BPAC feel they can participate in or that they have the time to participate in, they will be welcome to. We intend to work through that process, identifying areas that are areas of interest and importance to BPAC, and as well as Council's priorities for the year, and to come up with a plan as to how we involve both of our teams in that. Paul's team is a very small team compared to Council's team, and they do have other commitments, so there will be a level of requirement to fit around that, and it'll be something that we'll work out as we move through. It's not something that we can sort of commit a timetable to today. It needs to be sorted out in the fullness of what the season looks like and our different teams' availabilities, but the intent is there to bring the teams together, to get us on site together ahead of burns so that we grow those relationships and know how each other's works, and we grow that communication for the on-field part of the work.
If I could just add, there has been a sentiment here by councillors, including myself, that as much burning take place as possible, and I realised last year because of the season it was limited, and one would hope that that is the aim of council, to carry out as many burns as they can, with or without the assistance of BPAC.
The availability of one party or the other, I wouldn't suggest would be an impediment to planned burns progressing if the weather window is correct. Paul, would you like to perhaps give comment from BPAC's perspective on?
I'd just get advice from the CEO to bring a guest.
sorry.
Fine to do that.
Determination of the chair, not the officer.
Can I welcome Paul Dawson from BPAC to address the chamber, please, Mark, if that's right with you. Thank you. Paul, thanks so much.
Sorry.
Thanks for the question. Morning, councillors, Mayor.
Morning.
So essentially, with the nature of firework and it being variable, it's always difficult to plan, and there's always a degree of, I guess, adaptability required. But I think Mark mentioned one of the important steps is probably for us to spend time as teams on country before the fire season, so we understand how we see country, how we see the jobs ahead. So we've got commitment from both parties to do that, and I think that'll, from there, we'll both be looking at our burn schedules. We'll be able to have some loose stuff in calendars, etc. from there, but definitely the intent is, I think, over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be spending a bit of time together on country, which is a really important step.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much. Mark, did you have any other comments on that?
That would be my comment for now, unless Councillor has a follow-up question.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr Chair,
Thanks, Mark. Mayor Antonio.
if you don't mind, I was listening to John Welke, the District Inspector, I think, or he might even be above that now, of the Royal Fire Service,
suggesting that it's not a bad time now to do something about it. I just wouldn't mind the comments from Paul in respect to that, to do something about reduction burning, which I found a little bit unusual and a little bit out of season. But maybe Paul would like to just make a comment in respect to
Mayor
that.
Paul, would you like to answer on that question, your knowledge of that?
Thanks for the question, Mayor. Yeah, moisture is a key indicator of when we can apply fire, and I guess La Nina season, and we've had a little bit of water around, probably still not enough. It does open other windows, particularly when there's different, I guess, health syndromes in country, to do some burning through these summer windows. But at the moment, like, I guess the principle of everything is that we read country first. So if we're going to burn somewhere, we'd be looking at it specifically for what's happening on that patch at that time. But definitely it does change things when we're getting more moisture in the soil than we would at other times during this window. So it's definitely something we're keeping an eye on, and I guess meal bar or tabletop will be also keeping an eye on the moisture, whether that opens an earlier window than usual for there too.
Thank you.
Just have Councillor Von Hoff for a question, and Councillor Summerfield.
Thanks, Mr Chair, through you. So we seem all to be interested in the same thing, which is around when we can get started. And I think that's an acknowledgement of the importance that this council places on backburning. And so we've got, I have also heard Mr Welke talking about these early burn windows, and I think it is a bit of a change in our thinking to be looking, even considering something in February. And Victor Stephenson, who Mr Dawson knows well, he also advocates, reading the country, thinking about things in not such a rigid way, and thinking instead about what the vegetation and the land is telling us, and responding accordingly. So in terms of the timeframes, we've got, according to what we've heard this morning, over the next 4 to 6 weeks, some time will be spent together on country. We've got a disaster management meeting the first week in March, and I haven't seen the agenda of that, but I imagine that we will be talking about Operation Cool